Hey gang, what is up? So I'm doing this continuation of quick tips. This is part 2, right? And it's just a compilation of tricks or ideas to help you get the most out of your shop time, yeah? Let's get going. So here I'm applying some spray adhesive to some sandpaper and to one side of this dock plate. Now the dock plate will fit the domino machines, and not everybody has a domino machine, but this principle or application would apply to maybe a biscuit joiner, right? So this is where that magic or advantage happens. It's amazing how much gription the sandpaper adds, and this unit just sticks in place. And of course, I'm using my 90-degree deck for the domino machine. It'll fit either machine, the DF500 or the XL700. And they're much prettier now. They're anodized black with a window in the center. Anyway, I'll leave a link to those available on my website in the description. Anytime I'm cutting multiple pieces, especially when they're small, like these shop-made dominoes, I just tape one end, right? And then you can easily make all your cuts. All right, so nobody freak out here. I'm pulling the guard back just for clarity. You can see how this works. Fast, easy, accurate. Yeah. Made a simple jig to mark the holes for undermount drawer slides. I used to have this guy, but it registered off the outside. And if you use different thickness, that won't work. So register off the inside makes more sense. Of course, this one's bloom, orange. This one's for the grass. They are slightly different, but anyway, quick and easy. And then with that, I can just use one of these automatic punches. Boom. So if you don't have a sled for your router or your shaper, if you don't have a shaper, you can just back up some narrow pieces. These are just backups to prevent tear out. I can effectively run these copes. And I should clarify, there's 2 pieces that I've added. Of course, the tailing piece prevents tear out. The one in the front provides a place for engagement as I start the cut. It also prevents me from denting those other pieces that I need. And of course, if I'm doing both ends like I am here, I need that other piece for, to prevent tear out. Makes sense, yeah? Anyway, so yeah, at a pinch, you can gang them together like that, back them up, no tear out, very effective. Lots of ways to do things, yeah? I've shown this shop-made handle many times or variations of it. That inside corner is usually curved, but in this case, I wanted it more angular with a small inside radius. And I needed a jig that I could route downhill at both ends with that cut. Otherwise, I would get some severe tear out. But by making this jig reversible, I can flip that handle over and the router bit is always cutting downhill. Hope that makes sense. Now, one doesn't always use the fence at the router table for dust extraction, so I made this. I actually copied Woodpecker's design, but it's just a couple of pieces of plywood glued together, stacked up, right? I've got these 1/4 bolts with knobs going all the way through, and it attaches to the router table base. What's cool about this, besides the vacuum, is that it also serves as a starting pin or starting surface on that right side. I'll show that here in a bit. And later, I ended up adding some magnets so I could, store it easily. And I love these little cups for magnets. I'll leave a link in the description.
They actually add a little bit to the magnetic strength, but really the main reason I like them is that I can do test fits. I can just insert a magnet within the cup. I put these little notches in the cup so I can pry the magnet back out and make changes if I need to, or if I get rid of the jig, I don't have a magnet that's glued in permanently with epoxy or whatever. So similar to a starter pin, this has like a starting surface, right? I can first make contact with the right side of the jig and then use leverage to ease it into the router bit. I added a chunk of clear Lexan for added safety and improved vacuum. And my push stick serves mostly as a hold down, and I can pull it through with my left hand, keeping everything safe. And when not in use, this dude lives right there. This is one of my favorite ways to make templates quickly and easily. I like to use this Craig Foreman pocket cutter to make assembly easy. And I start with the bigger templates, and I'll just make a big template and then I can reduce it in size. So that works very well. Maybe the width is different, but the height is the same. And I can just start with the larger one and reduce it down to the smaller ones using 3 pieces. And then add the 4th piece as I continue to reduce the size. Again, routing outside to reduce the mess and ganging 2 at a time. That just makes sense, yeah.
I use this Easy Tack spray adhesive a lot, and for a lot of things, I like it better than this 3M contact cement. It's a finer mist and works better for a lot of applications like gluing down veneer. Anyway, a lot of times the spray tips get clogged, right? So what I do, I was able to find a pickle strainer, and with a separate search, I found this can, and I can just add those spray tips in there. A lot of these are straight off of an aerosol spray paint, right? And I can put those on and they always work. I have another one that I use for small router bits, right? And so I just keep a little bit of lacquer thinner in there, enough to cover the strainer. And yeah, when I go to use this spray adhesive, I know that it's going to always spray right out of the gate. There it goes.
And yep, these are available off my website. I'll leave a link in the description.
So I've got this board. It is warped, right? And I'm going to cut it at the table saw just to establish a straight edge. So I can take that straight edge and take it to the bandsaw and cut this into 3 boards. Since it's so warped and I do need 3 boards out of this, it makes sense rather than planing this down now or running it through the joiner to get one side flat, cut it into narrow strips, and that'll give me better yield because I'll remove or reduce some of that twist. So what I like doing is I like to clamp one corner down, and then I've got this gap here. So I'll just take a couple of shims, and my shims are consistent because I make them with a shim jig, so they're the same thickness on the ends. But I can take 2 of those shims that are the same size, slip them underneath here, and I'll just mark right there where that bottoms out. And I know that that's half of the gap, right? So now I can just take half that gap, put it over here, clamp that down. I can clamp this end down. That'll keep that from rocking, and I'm splitting the difference on that twist. That way that maximizes your yield in the thickness of your board.
So this could be well known. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know. But I like using a heat gun to remove stuck or stubborn tape. Check it out. This is especially useful when you have wood fibers that could get torn out from the tape and you want to prevent that, of course. Yeah. So I'm making this little box to hold a straight edge, and somehow one end turned out about a 1/16 narrower than the other end, about 1.5 millimeters. I don't know how that happened, but it did. Here's my solution.
So here's my back or my bottom, and this is cut to fit the widest part. I need to taper this 1/16. A lot of ways to do that. I have a slider. I could easily do that with a Fritz Franz jig, but here's what I'm going to do. I just have a long straight edge. This just needs to be longer than your piece, really twice as long, or it just won't work correctly. But anyway, I've got this straight edge. I could use some of these spacer sets and grab one that's 1/16 or a 1/16 drill bit. I'll just tape this. Guess I could tape it like that. Doesn't really matter too much. 1/16 drill bit taped to one end. We'll run that through.
So what's funny is the title of this tip is Accurate Tapered Cuts. If I would have been accurate, I wouldn't need to taper this cut.
So on this end I have 3 and 15/16, 3 and 7/8 exact, right? Has to be 1/16 drill bit.
Yeah, I just needed a place to hang this meter-long straight edge. Man, I love this thing. Super, super handy. Boom.
All right, so more and more tools are going cordless, but still we have tools with cords. And a big one for me is when people wrap their cord and they pull it tight. Eventually this wire is going to break right here, right? So you should always put a bit of a loop, give this a little bit of flex, right? Here's how I like to roll up cords. I've got this old hot melt gun that won't quit. You can see the handle's been Frankensteined, taped back together. But I like to put a loop here so this has some slack. Then I bring part of the cord up and then I just start to wrap that. Then I take the excess of this and then rather than flipping that through all the way, I just put a loop here, pull the slack down. And then you can store it nicely, and then when you go to use it, all you do is pull that to release it. Cord comes apart quickly and ready to use.
So a process that I always employ, whether I'm using this type of sander or a belt sander, is I like to start at the corners to establish flat, right? And then I venture out on that narrow ledge. And you'll notice I start in the corner and I go about halfway across that component. Then I return to the corner as a starting point. This way, as long as those two adjacent pieces in the corner are flush to each other, I start out flat and square and I stay flat and square. Here we go, nothing too tricky here. Just made another dispenser for some more bubble wrap. You may already know this, but when you're working with calipers, if you want to see the difference between two components, like I'm doing here with this tabletop and this edging, I'll mic one of the components and then I will zero it out. Then when I measure the other piece, it'll show me the difference. Pretty simple, yeah? Very effective. I love that little tip.
So I'm in the process of laying out some dominoes for these supports for a project that I'm working on, and I find it very helpful to take a domino and put a center line down it. And the way I do it is I just use a scribe. These are typically used for scribing countertops or trim to a crooked wall cabinet pieces. And so I just center it by rotating that back and forth. And then I can just easily mark those dominoes, right? Something like that. And then when I go to lay these out, I have a good reference to put a line on the edge of my workpiece. All right, so now that I got my marks set up or laid out on one piece, I can take that same scribe, turned out as about 9/16 plus, or about 15 millimeters. I can set my scribe and then mark these. I find a scribe somewhat easier, faster, and perhaps more versatile than a marking gauge. Now I've got my lines laid out, and I can take this to the domino machine and the domino dock. Yeah? Hey, if you're like me, you love your Festool machines, right? But sometimes plugging in the electrical cord can be a little bit awkward. Get in here a little bit closer, cameraman. So what I do is I just take a good quality liquid maca, put a couple of white dots, and bam, now you can see that quick and easy, right? Hey, I hope this helps.
Haha, I'm a dork, but it sure is fun imitating Sedge from Festool. Anyway, hope you got something out of this video. Thanks a ton for watching. Remember to click, like, subscribe, learn.